General Hospital spoilers reveal that, as someone who has followed General Hospital for decades, I find myself both intrigued and quietly unsettled by the latest developments, particularly the direction of the investigation surrounding Cullum and the increasingly complex position of Dante. I have seen many investigations unfold in Port Charles over the years, but this one feels different, almost as if the truth itself is being reshaped in real time rather than uncovered piece by piece. And I cannot help but ask myself, what exactly is Dante truly chasing here? Justice or something far more complicated? From my perspective, Dante's decision to reopen the investigation into the shooting of Cullum is not merely procedural. It carries a weight that suggests personal conviction, perhaps even suspicion that the official narrative has been manipulated. I have watched Dante grow from a conflicted young officer into a man who values truth above convenience, and yet here he seems to be stepping into territory that is murkier than ever. The case itself already presents contradictions, but what strikes me most is how Dante appears to be aware that the crime may not be as straightforward as it seems. Cullum, after all, is not a simple victim. His connections, his secrets, and his behavior all point to a man deeply entangled in dangerous networks. So when Dante pushes forward, I cannot help but feel he is not just searching for a shooter, he is probing a system of hidden motives. Then there is Jocelyn, whose quiet fear adds another layer of tension that I find particularly compelling. When Dante reveals that he knows about her involvement with the WSB, the entire dynamic shifts. I have seen many characters attempt to balance double lives, but Jocelyn's situation feels especially fragile. She is young, determined, and perhaps not yet fully aware of the consequences of operating in such a dangerous space. The question that lingers in my mind is whether Dante's knowledge will protect her or expose her. Is he watching her out of concern, or is he beginning to see her as part of the puzzle he is trying to solve? What fascinates me is how this revelation subtly alters the power balance. Jocelyn is no longer just an observer or a curious bystander. She becomes a potential key to understanding the truth behind Cullum's shooting. And yet, instead of stepping back, she seems even more drawn into the mystery. I have to wonder if this is a sign of courage or a dangerous underestimation of the forces at play. In Port Charles, curiosity often comes at a cost, and I fear that Jocelyn may be edging closer to a line she cannot easily cross back from. At the same time, Dante's approach raises important questions about trust and control. If he knows Jocelyn's secret, why reveal it now? Why not act quietly, gather information, and keep his advantage? To me, this suggests that Dante is not simply playing a strategic game. There is an emotional undercurrent here, a sense that he wants transparency even when it may complicate matters. But transparency in a situation like this can be dangerous. It invites reactions, shifts alliances, and perhaps most importantly, exposes vulnerabilities. And this brings me back to Cullum himself. I have long believed that characters like him are never merely victims. The way the story is unfolding seems to confirm that suspicion, the idea that his own actions, his own hidden dealings, may be tied to the attempt on his life, adds a layer of moral ambiguity that I find both refreshing and unsettling. It challenges the audience to reconsider what justice looks like in this context. If Cullum is both victim and instigator, then what exactly is Dante trying to resolve? A crime or a chain of consequences set into motion long before the shooting occurred? What makes this storyline particularly compelling for me is the sense of adjustment, of shifting ground beneath every character involved. Nothing feels fixed. Dante is searching, but the target keeps moving. Jocelyn is learning, but each revelation seems to deepen the mystery rather than clarify it. And Cullum, even from a position of vulnerability, continues to influence events in ways that are not immediately visible. I find myself reflecting on how different this feels from earlier arcs in the show. In the past, investigations often led to clear resolutions, moments where truth triumphed and order was restored. Here, however, the process itself seems to be the point. The uncertainty, the overlapping motives, the quiet tension between what is known and what is suspected, these elements create a narrative that feels more layered, more reflective of real human complexity. And yet, I cannot ignore a lingering concern. When stories become this intricate, there is always a risk of losing clarity. Will the writers bring these threads together in a way that feels earned, or will the resolution leave us with more questions than answers? I remain hopeful, but cautious. After all these years, I have learned that General Hospital often thrives on keeping its audience slightly off balance. Still, I must admit there is a certain excitement in that uncertainty. It keeps me watching, keeps me thinking, keeps me invested in characters I have come to know so well. Dante's determination, Jocelyn's quiet fear, and the shadow cast by Cullum's secrets all combine to create a storyline that feels alive, unpredictable, and deeply engaging. So I continue to watch, to question, and to reflect, because if there is one thing I have learned from years of following this show, it is that the truth in Port Charles is never simple. And perhaps, in this case, the real story is not about who shot Cullum, but about what that act reveals about the characters, their choices, and the fragile line between justice and consequence. From where I stand, Dante's actions are beginning to reflect a man who understands that the dangers surrounding Rocco are not temporary or isolated. There is a growing sense that something has fundamentally changed, that the threats facing this young boy are tied to forces far more complex than anyone initially believed. I have seen Dante face danger before, and I have seen him stand firm in the face of uncertainty, but this situation feels different. There is a subtle urgency in his behavior now, a recognition that hesitation could cost him everything. What strikes me most is how this protective instinct is reshaping Dante's role within the broader narrative. He is no longer just an investigator seeking answers. He is becoming a shield, a barrier between Rocco and a world that is growing increasingly unpredictable. And yet, I cannot help but wonder, can he truly keep that world at bay, or is he already too late? There is a quiet tension building around the idea that Rocco himself may be closer to the center of danger than anyone wants to admit. Dante's efforts to protect him suggest that he knows more than he is saying, or at the very least suspects that the truth is far more troubling than it appears. This is where the story begins to take on a sharper edge. Protection, in this context, is not just about keeping Rocco safe physically. It is about controlling information, limiting exposure, and perhaps even confronting truths that could shatter everything Dante believes in. I find myself asking whether Dante is preparing not just to defend, but to fight. There are signs, subtle but unmistakable, that he is ready to stand against whatever threat is emerging, even if it means stepping outside the lines he once respected. That, to me, is where the real shock lies. Dante has always been guided by a strong moral compass, but when family is involved, those boundaries can blur. And when they do, the consequences are rarely simple. This shift creates a ripple effect that touches every part of the story. If Dante is willing to challenge the dangers head-on, it means the threat itself must be significant enough to justify such a risk. It raises questions about who or what he is truly up against. Is this about a single incident? Or is it part of a larger pattern that is only now beginning to reveal itself? The more I think about it, the more I am convinced that this is not an isolated crisis. It feels like the beginning of something much bigger, something that will test not only Dante's resolve, but the stability of those around him. At the same time, there is an emotional undercurrent that cannot be ignored. Dante's determination is not driven by fear alone. It is driven by love, by responsibility, and by a deep-seated need to protect what matters most to him. That is what makes this storyline resonate so strongly. It is not just about danger, it is about the lengths a person is willing to go when faced with the possibility of losing someone they care about. And yet, for all his strength, Dante is still human. There is always the possibility that his efforts, no matter how well-intentioned, could lead to unintended consequences. Protection can sometimes become isolation, and in trying to shield Rocco, he may inadvertently push him further into the shadows where the truth becomes harder to see. This is why I find this particular arc so compelling. It is layered, emotionally charged, and filled with uncertainty. Dante is standing at a crossroads, whether he fully realizes it or not. The choices he makes now will not only determine Rocco's safety, but could also redefine who he is as a father, as a man, and as someone who has always tried to do what is right. In the end, what stays with me is not just the tension or the looming sense of danger, but the quiet intensity of Dante's resolve. He is preparing for something that much is clear. And as a viewer who has followed his journey for so long, I cannot help but feel that whatever comes next will leave a lasting impact not just on him, but on the entire world he is trying so desperately to protect